In the dark and desperate early years of the Pacific War, there was one brutal truth that every American pilot understood. Japan ruled the skies. Their fighter, the Mitsubishi A6M0, was a ghost made of lethal grace. It climbed faster, turned tighter, and struck with deadly precision. It seemed invincible. It shredded American aircraft, burned carriers, and left entire squadrons falling into the sea. And so the United States needed something more than a fighter. They needed a monster, a machine that didn't follow the rules of aerodynamics. A machine born from a risk so bold that most believed it couldn't work. A machine that many experts said would destroy more American pilots than it ever saved.
The nickname and initial rejection.
That machine was the F4U Corsair. They called it the bent-wing bird, because only a bird designed by a madman would have wings that bent downward and then sharply back up again, like a predator's talons curled for the kill. And at first, pilots hated it. It tried to kill rookies during takeoff. It slammed into flight decks. It bounced like a rubber ball when landing. And the Navy, humiliated, refused to bring it aboard their carriers. "This thing is dangerous," the carrier captain said. "This thing will get our men killed." The unspoken power. But beneath the reputation, beneath the fear, was raw power. A power that, once unleashed, would completely erase the myth of Japanese air superiority and turn the sky into a hunting ground where Corsair pilots ruled with absolute dominance. This is the story of the fighter Japan couldn't kill, how a rejected monster became the deadliest predator of the Pacific, and how its legend was forged in courage, fire, and sacrifice. This is the story of the F4U Corsair. Chapter 1. The Crisis in the Air. In late 1941, the United States Navy was still flying the Grumman F4F Wildcat. It was tough, loyal, reliable. But against the Zero, it was outclassed in nearly every way. Japanese Zeros dove from the sun like falling knives. They twisted through the clouds with impossible agility. They seemed to float through bullets without fear. American aviators learned quickly, if you try to dogfight a Zero, you die. Pearl Harbor had burned. Wake Island had fallen. The Philippines were collapsing. The United States needed a miracle. They needed a fighter that could climb faster than gravity, dive like doom itself, take bullets, and give back death. A fighter that could turn the hunters into prey. Chapter 2. The Technological Dare. Expansion. Beisel's Genius and Engine Specifications. Enter Rex Beisel, chief designer at Vought. He didn't want to build a nice airplane. He wanted to build the fastest, most powerful single-engine fighter on the planet. He demanded an engine so big that mechanics stared at it like artillery. Ni R2800 Double Wasp, delivering 2,000 horsepower from 18 cylinders. This was the most powerful radial engine ever put into a fighter at that time. Expansion. The landing gear conundrum. But such power comes with a curse. The problem was simple geometry. How do you attach a giant propeller to a fighter without making the landing gear absurdly long? If the propeller was too big, it would hit the deck. If the landing gear was too tall, it would collapse on landing, which meant pilots would die. A normal engineer would shrink the engine, weaken the propeller, or give up. Rex Beisel did none of that. Expansion Inverted gull wing solution. He bent the wings. The Corsair's wings dipped downward from the fuselage, then sharply angled upward. This inverted gull wing allowed the use of short, robust landing gear while still clearing the giant propeller. It was a brilliant solution, but it came with a price paid in blood. Chapter 3, The Record-Breaking Speed. June 29th, 1940. The prototype took to the air, and suddenly, everything changed. The Corsair was fast, scary fast. It broke 400 miles per hour in level flight, the first U.S. fighter in history to do so. It climbed like a rocket. It felt like a wild animal trying to tear itself free of the sky. Test pilots came back shaking from adrenaline. "This thing is a beast," one said, "and that's a good thing." The Navy ordered it into production immediately, but the devil was hiding where he was hardest to see. The landing. The moment that decides whether a pilot comes home or becomes a name etched into metal. Chapter 4. The Killer's Betrayal. Expansion Carrier Landing Horrors. Carrier landing tests began. The deck looked small, the tailhook lowered, the Corsair descended. Then it dropped to the last few feet like a sack of lead. The landing gear bounced. Hard. The aircraft slammed sideways. Wings smashed into deck equipment. Pilots broke bones. Some never stood again. Expansion, visibility, and nickname. It got worse. The long nose of the Corsair blocked the view forward. Pilots could not see the carrier during approach. They had to fly a curved landing path, guessing where the deck would appear. A single mistake meant a propeller strike, a fatal spin, or sliding into a dozen parked aircraft. Even the bravest aviators felt their stomach twist before landing. The Corsair earned its first nickname, Ensign Eliminator, the ensign being the most junior pilot rank. Flight deck officers begged the Navy, "Remove this killer from our carriers," and the Navy obeyed. The Corsair was banned from carrier operations. The world's fastest fighter was rejected. Its enemies laughed. Its creators panicked. Its pilots buried friends. The bent-wing bird had fallen. The monster was locked in its cage. Chapter 5. The Marines find their monster, but the U.S. Marine Corps saw something the Navy could not. They didn't need perfect landings. They didn't need elegance. They needed air dominance. They needed fear in the heart of the enemy. They needed the biggest claws in the sky. The Marines took the Corsair and sent it to the places where men did not come home easily. Guadalcanal, Bougainville, Rabaul. Battles where Marines fought to their last bullets and beyond. Far from the polished flight decks of the Navy, the Corsair awakened. Because in the hands of Marine pilots, the monster finally found its purpose. Chapter 6. Baptism by Fire and New Doctrine. Expansion, the first combat test. Early 1943. The Corsair arrived in the South Pacific, a place where survival is decided in seconds. Marine Squadron VMF-124 was first. They flew from muddy jungle runways carved by bulldozers. Their enemy, veteran Japanese aces, men who had dominated the skies since Pearl Harbor. The Marines were nervous, having heard the stories. "The Corsair will kill you if the enemy doesn't." And, "The Zero will dance rings around you, I see." But war destroys stories quickly. Expansion, embracing power and speed. The first time the Corsairs met Zeros in combat, the results shocked everyone. The Marines did not dogfight. They did not turn. They did not play by Japanese rules. Instead, they used what the Corsair did best. Power, speed, fire. A Zero, climbing, after a Corsair. The Corsair simply throttled up and left it shrinking in the distance. A Zero turning tightly. The Corsair dove, gaining 100 miles per hour in seconds, and came up beneath with blazing guns. The bent wing bird struck like a hawk attacking a sparrow. That day, the Marines scored multiple kills. The comfort of the Zero's supremacy began to crack. One pilot wrote in his flight log, "This is no wildcat. This thing hunts." Chapter 7. The Zero Killer emerges. The Marines discovered a simple rule. Don't fight like a Zero. Fight like a Corsair. The Japanese strategy relied on agility and deception. They wanted a turning fight, a fight of finesse, a knife duel. The Corsair brought a sledgehammer. 6 Browning .50 caliber machine guns, each one capable of slicing a Zero in half in a single burst. They standardized a new doctrine. Boom and zoom attacks, high-speed slashing the eye, vertical maneuvers, and strictly no-turning battles. Expansion, unprecedented kill ratio. And the results? The kill ratio skyrocketed. By late 1943, the Corsair achieved a kill ratio of 11-1. Later it would climb to 13-1, among the highest of any fighter in history. Japanese ace Saburo Sakai once said, "We could not follow the big F4U. It was too fast." Another Zero pilot added, "We feared its diving attack most of all." Fear, the most powerful weapon any fighter can wield. Chapter 8. The Marine Legends. Expansion. The Saga of Pappy Boyington. Among the pilots who transformed the Corsair into a legend, one name stands above the rest. Major Gregory Pappy Boyington. Rough, loud, a born fighter. He commanded VMF 214, the Black Sheep Squadron, a group of misfits, outcasts, and daredevils. Boyington flew like he lived, aggressive and unafraid of death. Every takeoff was a war, every landing was a gamble, but every flight, he was a chance to kill the enemy. In just 84 days, Boyington shot down 28 enemy aircraft, tying the U.S. Marine Corps record. His Corsair became the symbol of vengeance. Japanese pilots cursed him. American pilots revered him. His squadron radio call sign was simple. Pappy 1. Target in sight. His victories pushed the Corsair toward immortality. Expansion, capture, and return. But even legends fall. Boyington was shot down, captured, and tortured in a Japanese prison camp. His men believed he was dead. When he returned home after the war, he returned as a ghost who refused to die. His story, like the Corsair, became a reminder. Victory carries a price, paid in blood. Chapter 9. The Unbreakable Construction. Expansion, detailed armor, and durability. It wasn't only speed, it wasn't only firepower. The Corsair survived hits that would tear other fighters apart. Japanese pilots reported, "We shot at it, and it just kept coming." Why? The answer was Vaught's commitment to durability. Massive radial engine. Bullets often passed through without stopping it. self-sealing fuel tanks, bullet-resistant cockpit and windscreen, thick armor protecting the pilot and controls. The Corsair could take damage, bleed oil, and still fly home on one wing and a prayer. Zeros were agile, but they were fragile. A single .50 caliber hit could ignite them like paper. In the South Pacific, strength defeated elegance, and slowly, painfully, the Zero's reputation began to crumble into the sea. Chapter 10. Carrier Redemption. Expansion. The list of fixes. The Navy had abandoned the Corsair, but war has no room for pride. Carrier groups needed a faster fighter, desperately. The Hellcat was good, but the Corsair was a monster waiting in the shadows. So engineers fixed what pilots feared. Better landing gear damping. Raised pilot seat for forward visibility. Improved approach technique. Quad. Curved landing perfected. New tail wheel design. Flap adjustments for smoother descent. Expansion. The vengeance fulfilled. And finally, in 1944, the Corsair returned to the carriers. A moment that felt like vengeance fulfilled. The plane they once rejected was now the protector of their most valuable ships. One Navy pilot wrote, "Landing her was still terrifying, but at least now it was possible. The beast had been tamed, just enough to unleash it where it belonged." Chapter 11. Black smoke over the Pacific. Now the Corsair had the sea behind it, the Marines beneath it, and the enemy in front of it. It became a nightmare for Japanese pilots and sailors alike. Corsair missions included fighter sweeps over Truk, strafing runs over Rabal's airfields, attacks on convoys and destroyers, and night fighting with converted radar-equipped models. The bent-wing bird owned the Pacific sky. American sailors cheered when they saw its silhouette overhead. Japanese soldiers prayed. They never did. By late 1944, Japan had lost the air war. Zeros burned, carriers sank. A nation that once dominated the sky now hid from the storm. The Corsair wasn't just winning, it was erasing the enemy from existence. Chapter 12. The Night Hunters. Expansion. Radar and night combat. War does not end when the sun goes down. Japanese bombers often attacked under cover of darkness, believing night was their protection. But the Corsair had an answer. Engineers installed radar onto selected variants. She's a F4U, one of the first true U.S. Navy night fighters. These aircraft flew into the black void. No horizon, no moon, no chance to see the enemy. Just the steady pulse of a radar screen. And the pounding heart of a Marine in the cockpit. One night over Bougainville, a Corsair silently slid behind a Japanese bomber. The pilot squeezed the trigger, and flames illuminated the sky like lightning. For the first time, Japanese bombers learned, even the night belongs to the Corsair. Chapter 13. The Ultimate Predator versus Kamikaze. The war in the Pacific was reaching its bloody crescendo. Japan had retreated to its islands, its circle of defense closing in, but cornered enemies fight hardest. They unleashed a new terror, kamikaze attacks, Radical pilots dove their planes into American ships, a deadly spear thrown by a dying empire. Carrier groups needed a defender who could climb fast and hit hard, a fighter that could shred suicide aircraft before they reached the fleet. The Corsair became that sword. Marine and Navy pilots took off again and again, intercepting kamikazes within seconds of detection. Reports described Corsair squadrons destroying multiple attackers in a single mission. Flight decks, once terrified of the bent-wing bird, now gave thanks every time its wheels slammed home. The plane that once crashed more than it landed was now the shield protecting the Pacific Fleet. Chapter 14. The Beast returns to battle. The last shots of World War II faded. Cities burned, navies sank. Pilots embraced the ground with trembling knees. But peace did not last. Only 5 years later, war erupted again. The Korean War. Technology had evolved. The enemy now flew jet fighters. Sleek, silver, supersonic threats. The feared MiG-15, the Corsair, a propeller-driven relic, should have been obsolete. But history has a sense of humor. Chapter 15. Propeller versus Jet. The impossible victory. Expansion. Details of the jet kills. April 21st, 1951. Joey Fulford of VF 884 took off in his trusty Corsair, a machine born in 1940 and hardened in the Pacific. Up above, the howl of a MiG, shiny, fast, arrogant, the jet dove. Fulford turned into him, guns blazed. The MiG erupted in fire. A kill, a jet defeated by a prop. It happened again. May 10th, 1952. Marine Captain Jesse Fulmer engaged a pair of MiGs. Impossible odds. 2-1. He didn't back down. Fulmer fired a tight burst until a MiG-15 exploded in midair. The remaining jet hit him hard while his Corsair was shredded, fuel spraying. But Fulmer refused to die. He glided to the coast and ejected, just barely alive. His victory shocked the world. Newspapers shouted the story. The prop fights back. Even in the jet age, the Corsair still killed. Chapter 16. The Angels of the Sky. Expansion, close air support. Not all heroes carry 6 guns. Corsairs flew dangerous close air support missions in Korea, protecting ground troops, blasting enemy strongholds, pinning down forces that threatened to overrun Allied lines. Pilots dove into walls of gunfire, their cockpits ringing with metal shards. Ground soldiers wrote home, "When the bent-wing birds came, we lived another day." The plane that once terrified pilots on landing now saved thousands of lives on the ground. The Marines gave it a new name, the Angel of the Mud. Chapter 17. The Final Flight. A ceasefire silenced the guns in Korea. The Corsair's duty, after more than a decade of war, was finished. Hangars grew quiet, propellers rusted. The monster that saved the Pacific was retired, but its sound never left the memory. Pilots who flew it said, "Nothing ever climbed like her, nothing ever fought like her, and nothing ever made me feel so alive." Chapter 18. A Legend Remembered. Expansion, the Legacy Summary. The statistics tell the story. First U.S. fighter to break 400 miles per hour, over 2,000 Japanese aircraft destroyed. Kill ratio 13-1, served in World War II in Korea, and feared by every enemy pilot who saw its wings. But the true legacy of the Corsair lived in the men who trusted it. Men who strapped themselves to a powerhouse of steel, fuel, and fury. Men who took off from flight decks, not knowing if they'd be. Men who fought for skies that were filled with death. Many never came home. Their names lie carved in marble and whispered on the wind above quiet oceans. The bent-winged bird was more than a fighter. It was a promise that freedom would not fall from the sky. And thanks to it, freedom did not. Chapter 19. A plane that refused to die. Expansion, the soccer war. Even after Korea, the Corsair simply wouldn't disappear. Other fighters sat in museums, silent and forgotten. But the bent-wing bird kept flying. All the way into the late 1960s, Corsairs served across Latin America. They fought in actual wars decades after their birth. El Salvador, Honduras, the Soccer War. In 1969, two nations went to war over immigration and a soccer match. Jet fighters streaked through the sky, but the most feared aircraft of the conflict, the F4U Corsair. Two prop-driven legends, both Corsairs, engaged in one of the last dogfights in history between piston-engine fighters, even at the end of its long, violent life. The Corsair remained what it was always meant to be, a predator. Chapter 20. The engineering that changed everything. Expansion, design influence on modern jets. The Corsair's radical design did more than win battles. It rewrote the playbook for aviation. It was the first true 400-mile-per-hour naval fighter. The inverted gull-wing design unlocked more powerful engines. Aerodynam, Naman, Simic, Chopri Bang influenced the future of carrier aviation. Its rugged structural engineering became a Marine Corps standard. Its high-visibility cockpit design inspired later jet fighters. Lessons written in Fire Over the Pacific shaped the jets that came after. The Sky Raider, the Phantom, the Tomcat, they all carried a gene from the bent-wing bird. Chapter 21. What Japan feared most. Japanese pilots, years after the war, admitted something extraordinary. The Zero was the most dangerous plane, until the Corsair came. They knew they could not catch it in a dive, could not escape its claws, and could not survive its guns. One ace said it simply, "If the Corsair saw you first, you were already dead." The hunter had become the hunted. Chapter 22. The Wings That Guarded Heaven. Expansion, the price of survival. Corsair pilots speak quietly when they remember those years. Memories return in flashes. A wingman hit and spiraling down. A carrier deck rising through smoke. A radio crackling. Then silence. Night skies filled with tracer fire. The unbearable weight of survival. Many lived, many did not. At military cemeteries in quiet corners of America, you can find the names. Pilots of the F4U Corsair. Men who flew into battle in a machine that demanded perfection. They did not fly for glory. They flew because the mission needed them, and because their brothers on the ground needed angels above. Chapter 23. The Enduring Legacy. History sometimes forgets its greatest guardians, but the bent-wing bird left a legacy that cannot fade. It turned defeat into dominance. It protected every Marine on every beach. It took the war back to Japan. And then when the world tried to move on, it kept fighting anyway. Technology moves forward. Generations rise and grow old. But when you hear that deep radial roar, a thunder that shakes the air, you remember a truth written in sacrifice. Freedom is not silent. Freedom flies on wings. Chapter 24, The Final Word. Expansion. The promise. Kept. In museums today, the Corsair rests proudly, wings folded like a warrior at peace. Visitors stop, they stare, they wonder, how could something so strange, so dangerous, so imperfect become the aircraft that Japan couldn't kill? The answer is simple. It wasn't just the machine. It was the men. The ones who climbed into that cockpit, looked down a long nose that hid the world from them, and pushed the throttle forward anyway. For them, the Corsair wasn't a nightmare. It was a promise kept at 400 miles per hour, a promise kept above blue oceans and black nights, a promise kept by courage no enemy could break. And that is why the F4U Corsair will forever be remembered as the bird of freedom.